Before I get started, I want all your attention to be directed towards those boards. I know it's a little bit strange to see this kind of thing, but you know it for sure, that is phobia. But what kind of phobia is this? Why there is a darkness behind those letters? Well, before I explain, let me ask you this question first. Have you ever feared the extreme uncertainty of your future? Well, personally, I have experienced this phobia a lot these days. This phobia is called thanatophobia, which mainly concerns the fear of death. Well, each time I visualize or think about this phobia, I kind of visualize the eternal darkness swallowing me up. Well, what is the actual interpretation of the fear of death? Well, Greek philosopher Epicurus believed that the fear of death is the worst fear we face when we are alive because it pervades our mind and thoughts and stops us from living a happy life. And in order to live a happy life, we have to rid ourselves of the fear of death. Well, is it that easy to get rid of the fear of death? I don't think so. Well, death is often good when it ends the great suffering, pain that we experience. But it's nothing more than a curse when it comes too early, cutting the full potential of life. Well, another reason why we fear death is that we confusedly imagine ourselves experiencing our own death. Not the process of dying, of course, but the condition of being dead. Well, yet, when we are dead, we are completely unaware of our physical condition. And what I mean by that is, there no longer is an I that I can experience or feel or anything for that matter. So, I applied this idea to many states of my life, and whoever passes, my neighbor, relative, friend, I started thinking that they have gone to somewhere good and they will no longer experience a pain or something like that, and they're out of my life now for good. And it's unlikely that I will find it hard to accept. And people who are gone from my world were part of my world, and now they are not. I myself, however, will always be part of my world, which is why trying to imagine my non-existence is the same as trying to imagine the end of the world. Well, another reason why we fear death is that we have experienced from the death of other people that when they die, the world continues to exist. And which strongly suggests that when I die, the world continues to exist. Which is kind of upsetting, because we kind of start feeling that we basically live for nothing. So, we strive to be immortal, which means the life without end. Well, what if our greatest wish was granted and we became immortal? Would it be a blessing or a curse? We fear death, but life without it would be even more terrifying. We would have several careers, multiple spouses, develop more interests, and in short, more of everything. But more time does not necessarily mean endless time. Is there an activity that you can do, not for a long time, but for forever? I'm pretty sure you're going to lose interest one day, whatever kind of activity it might be. And the idea of wasting time would become nonsensical if you have life without end. And imagine you're playing a video game in a rainy Sunday afternoon and your friend comes to and says, "Hey buddy, what are you doing? Get up and let's go to gym, let's go to library, let's go to, let's say school, let's do something, reading or useful stuff. You're wasting time." Well, that would sound ridiculous because you have time without end. And so, but when our days are numbered, when our time is limited, they are the ultimate incentive for us to act. Could life be serious without the limits of mortality? Isn't it the limit on our time the reason why we take life seriously and live it passionately? Even if we were immortal, we'd eventually realize that it's nothing more than a profound boredom and meaninglessness. So, I don't want you to fear death, and I don't want you to try to be immortal, but I want you to overcome the fear of death. Life has no terrors for those who have thoroughly apprehended that there are no terrors for them to cease to exist. And Yeah, whatsoever causes the pain when death is present, it causes a groundless pain in the expectation. Well, expectation is basically a feeling that something good or bad is going to happen. And it's an emotion too. But, sometimes letting go of emotions leads us to endless pain and depression. But would it be a mistake to say that our emotions are blind urges unaffected by the way we think and believe? Take anger, for example. We get angry for a reason. I'm mad because I was wrong in some way, but if I discover that I was mistaken, my pain will disappear. Similarly, Hellenistic philosophers believed that the fear of death rests on a false beliefs that strong argument can easily take away. And there was this joke by a Seneca, one of the Greek philosophers, said, wouldn't you call him an utter fool who cried because he wasn't present 1,000 years ago? Like, what I mean by this is, like, we don't feel horror for our past non-existence, the time before we were born. For example, I was born in 2005, and I don't feel horror for not being present in 2004, 2003, and so on. And similarly, it would be a mistake to feel horror for our future non-existence, the time after we die. So we somehow have to understand the value of death. This is the only way to accept how death can be overcame. Even if we're immortal, just imagine, even if we're immortal, how could we be brave, noble, or any of the virtues that require the risk and threat of life? Imagine reaching the top of the mountain by going through deadly paths, roads, fighting animals along the way, but you still manage to reach the top of the mountain, which is very fulfilling and you feel happy about this. But if you were immortal, nobody would care because everybody else would do this. So we have to somehow understand the integrity of death for our lives. Epicurus believed that the pleasure defined as lack of pain and mental disturbance is the goal of life. And in order to achieve that goal, we have to rid ourselves of the fear of death. Well, especially, fear of death. So eliminating the fear of death can be achieved only through the correct understanding of the notion of the death. We have to somehow interpret the notion of the death in a right way. In addition to it, the correct understanding of the notion of the death is what gives us an urgency to achieve our long-term goals, appreciate our loved ones, and which eventually concludes our story. And I had this quote another day in Kung Fu Panda 1, where Master Oogway said, let me imitate him a little bit. Yesterday is a history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That is why it's called present. Well, even though if he's a cartoon character, he made me appreciate him and have a high respect for him because he was very, very right about his point. Because the future is extremely uncertain, we have to extrapolate from the present. And this quote switches to the situation of most people who are nowadays diagnosed with the life-limiting cancers, illnesses and diseases and so on. And doctors will tell them how much they have left, how much time they have left. And for some people, it's indeed unbearable and hard to accept. But for others, such prognosis acts as a motivating force. It's their marching towards the death that gives them the ultimate incentive to realize that the time they have left should be the most creative and fulfilling of all. So, if I were to tell you the same thing, that today is the last day of your life, would you take action or get depressed? As I said before, it's up to the way you interpret the fear of death. After all, the only world we know of is the world of becoming, where things constantly change and nothing lasts forever, including ourselves. And becoming is in fact the only thing we experience and even imagine. So I realized eventually that life is a game, but it's totally unfair because you don't win this because you die one day. But if you can win the game, change the rules. You might get it wrong, of course, but winning such present moment, inscribing being onto becoming, is maybe what life is all about. So get the most out of present. Thank you for listening.